he said. "Do you imagine I should do with this?" A younger man was sitting at the edge of the desk, swinging his foot. With the downcast gaze of the guilty, he turned the upper disc with his finger. The hole moved. The blue persisted. "It belonged to my father," he said. "I thought you might make something of it." Nick Carlton, editor of the Chronicle and grieving son, looked with unconcealed amusement about the small office, which, despite the plastic Venetian blinds and the computer's hard drive humming as it laboured at its work, despite the 20th century wearing itself out on the pavements 3 floors down, gave the impression that at any moment a gramophone might strike up a Schubert lieder. "I was sorry," said Thomas gravely, "to hear of your loss. The death of a father," he said, frowning at the window, "is at the same time both quite proper in the order of things and incomprehensibly stupid." "I never saw him use it," said Carlton, containing tears. "And I don't know how it works. It's a planisphere, a map of the stars." "I see. And what do you imagine I should do with it?" The evening was coming doggedly in. Wind seeped over the concrete windowsill, and a bewildered pigeon struck the glass and slipped from view. "Well, you're our longest-serving contributor," said Carlton, flinching at the bang. "Our most admired. Indeed, I should say our most popular." "I'm beginning to speak like him," he thought. "Thomas Hart is catching. That's the trouble. I've often heard it said that it's a consolation. That's the general feeling, as I said to the board, to wake on Thursday morning and find your thoughts on Essex ghosts and literature and so on, before turning to the matters of the day." "Literature," said Thomas mildly to the planisphere, "is the matter of the day." "Your work has an old-fashioned feel," Carlton pressed on. "You'll allow me that. I argue that's your charm. Other papers might seek out some young person to be the voice of their generation, but here at the Essex Chronicle, we pride ourselves on our loyalty." "I could hardly have asked to be the voice of a generation," said Thomas, "since there is only one of me." Briefly, Carlton considered the other man, of whom he'd made such a study. He might have been appointed Professor of Thomas Studies at the University of Essex. He knew, for example, that Thomas was a confirmed bachelor, as they say, never seen in the company of a beautiful young person or a stately older one, that he had about him the melancholy religious air of a defrocked priest, and was known to attend a peculiar little chapel on the outskirts of town. He had a courtly manner considered an affectation by those who didn't like him, and irresistible by those who did. And if it couldn't be fairly said that he was strange, there was certainly the impression of his being the lone representative of his species. Of Thomas Hart's family, companions, politics, tastes in music and weekend pursuits, Carlton knew nothing, wondered often, and would never ask. That Thomas had worked for the Chronicle since 1976 was easily established, as was the fact that he'd published 3 brief novels since that date. Out of a sense of delicacy, Carlton never mentioned that he owned all 3 of these, and found them elegant and elliptical, couched in prose that had the cadence of the King James Bible, and concerned with deep feelings suppressed until the final pages, when some confusing event ensued, generally in bad weather. Were Carlton his literary agent, he might have pleaded with the other man to allow himself, in fiction at any rate, to say what he really felt, and not veil it all in atmosphere and metaphor. But he confined himself to glancing sometimes at the cheap green notebooks that attended Thomas like spore, and were now stacked 3 deep on his desk. Monday, he read surreptitiously, late winter, bad weather. It hadn't occurred to him that Thomas wouldn't know a planisphere when he had his hands on it, or that a tentative suggestion he looked to the stars would be so unwelcome. Blinking, he recalibrated his idea of Thomas Hart and became persuasive. "Loyalty," he said, "is a key concern of ours. But it is increasingly felt that you might benefit from new material, and it struck me you might like to write about astronomy. You see,